1978 Ford Mustang King Cobra. The second generation of the Ford Mustang debuted in 1974, and it was on the market for 4 years until 1978. Despite the fact it was the subject of so many jokes and bad press, the Mustang II was actually a really important model. The downsizing of the Mustang lineup, the introduction of economical 4-cylinder engines, and part sharing with other Ford models helped it survive the recession of the 70s and the death of the muscle car movement. But that doesn't mean there weren't any interesting Mustangs between 1974 and 1978. They were just quite slow. However, there was one particularly interesting model, and that was the special edition King Cobra. Ford knew their 5.0 V8 engine made only 140 horsepower in the Mustang II, so performance was sluggish. But they also knew that by dressing up the car, they could still attract buyers. So they introduced the King Cobra, complete with a massive flaming snake painted on the hood. Ford added front and rear spoilers, a full body kit, and turned the King Cobra into a classic example of a 70s factory custom car. They also paired the 5.0 V8 with a 4-speed manual transmission in an attempt to create a true performance car. Unfortunately, the actual performance was pretty terrible, but the outrageous body kit absolutely stole the show. Today, the Ford Mustang King Cobra has become a true collector's item. 1977 AMC Gremlin GT. The American Motors Company introduced the Gremlin on April 1, 1970, so everybody thought it was a joke. It was a subcompact American-made car with a funny design. However, it had good fuel economy by the standards of the day. Soon, the Gremlin became a popular and influential model, helping AMC survive the recession of the 70s. And AMC squeezed everything they could out of the little Gremlin by constantly introducing different variants. They managed to keep that old platform alive for almost a decade. But in 1977, AMC decided to turn the Gremlin into a muscle car. They installed a 304 V8 engine with just 120 horsepower. The ridiculously low power resulted in pretty terrible performance. However, the Gremlin GT was quite a looker, with a fresh graphics package, sporty wheels, and some interior upgrades. Realizing that performance was painfully slow even for a wannabe muscle car, AMC installed a 4.2-liter inline-six engine. Although it didn't produce much more horsepower, it did have more torque, which was enough for a little improvement. Still, the added power and heavy discounts by AMC dealers didn't help much, since production was low at around 3,000 copies. So AMC discontinued the GT option for the 1978 model year. 1977 Chevy Monza Mirage. Chevrolet presented the Monza in 1975 as their newest compact model. It came with a modern design, updated equipment, and a wide range of versions and trim levels. The Monza succeeded the Vega, selling well in the U.S. as well as abroad. However, the lack of a performance version was obvious, since the compact, relatively light platform could really benefit from a powerful engine. But Chevrolet didn't think a performance or muscle car version would have a big enough market, so they didn't bother developing one. However, Chevy contracted an outside company, Michigan Auto Techniques, to make a muscle car Monza for 1977. They called it the Monza Mirage, and they produced about 4,000 of them. The Mirage featured a 305 V8 with just 145 horsepower. The design was quite striking, with a white body, front and rear spoilers, and special wheels. The paint scheme was patriotic too, with red, blue, and white stripes all over the body. But Chevrolet soon realized there was still a market for sporty variants, so they decided to introduce the Monza Spider for 1978. This left Michigan Auto Techniques without a contract for 1978, sending the Monza Mirage into the automotive history books. Today, only a handful have survived, so if you find one, you should definitely try to restore it. It's a rare and forgotten muscle car. 1980 Mercury Capri RS. The introduction of the third-generation Mustang had a big influence on Mercury. This is because the brand got its own version in the form of the Capri in 1979. But from 1970 to 1977, Mercury sold the Capri. It was a model they imported from Germany with 4- and 6-cylinder engines. However, in 1979, thanks to the Mustang, the Capri was new and featured a unique front-end design. Since it was a Mercury product, it was a bit more upscale than Ford. But other than a few aesthetic changes, it was identical to the Mustang. As the performance version, Mercury introduced the RS model featuring a 2.3-liter turbocharged engine delivering just 135 horsepower. The performance was expectedly bad, but the car looked cool with a big air intake on the hood, big RS badges, and a rear spoiler. Today, those RS models are quite rare, although they're not particularly valuable or sought after by car collectors. 1981 Chevrolet Citation X11. The Chevrolet Citation X11 is an interesting car. It's a compact, front-wheel drive hatchback that Chevrolet produced from 1980 to 1985, but it had a somewhat powerful V6 engine and muscle car looks. This car walked a fine line between being an American hot hatch and a compact muscle car since it featured aspects of both segments. The Citation was a modern model that Chevrolet needed in order to compete with the growing number of import models, and it came in a wide range of flavors. The X11 featured a 2.8-liter V6 engine and made 135 horsepower. Even though that doesn't sound like much by today's standards, it was pretty solid for the time. But the X11 came with a few more upgrades, like a sport-tuned suspension, sharper steering, and better brakes. From the outside, you could spot the X11 thanks to its special bulged hood and unique trim details. And interestingly enough, magazine testers back in the day had a lot of good things to say about it. In fact, they noted it was much more than just a stronger engine and an appearance package. 1971 AMC Hornet 360. The early 70s marked the beginning of the end for muscle cars, with downsizing, stricter emissions, and tighter safety standards taking hold. But AMC was one of the first companies to recognize that a new kind of muscle car was needed to keep power-hungry drivers happy. So in 1971, they introduced the Hornet 360, just before the Malaise Era kicked off, though it still fits the profile. AMC took the Hornet, which was a basic economy car, and upgraded it with better suspension and sharper steering. Then they added a graphics package and dropped in a 360 V8, transforming this little Hornet from a plain compact into a legit muscle car. Now, the power wasn't huge, just 245 horsepower, but in a lightweight body, those horses really made the Hornet fly. Most other muscle cars in 1971 were struggling with bloated dimensions and detuned engines that couldn't deliver like they used to. But the Hornet 360, it was one of the fastest cars you could buy at the time. It also stands out as one of the few cars from the Malaise or pre-Malaise era that actually delivered real performance. Unfortunately, buyers didn't really grasp AMC's forward-thinking approach. Fewer than 800 Hornet 360s were sold in 1971, making them rare and largely forgotten muscle cars. In a time when bigger was always considered better, the Hornet 360 broke the mold with its compact size and strong engine. People just didn't realize what AMC was trying to do. 1983 Dodge OmniGH. While Europe was diving headfirst into the hot hatch scene and pushing the segment forward during the mid-80s, America didn't seem all that interested. Sure, the Volkswagen Golf GTI sold reasonably well in the States, but none of the domestic automakers were building anything they considered a true hot hatch. That is, until the legendary Carroll Shelby joined forces with Dodge to put his spin on the compact Omni. They called it the OmniGH, and it absolutely was a proper hot hatch. In fact, it ended up being one of the best affordable performance cars you could buy back then. Most folks didn't expect Dodge to produce anything that could hold a candle to the European competition, but with Shelby's involvement, that's exactly what happened. Shelby took the 2.2-liter four-cylinder engine and bolted on a turbocharger, pushing output to an impressive 175 horsepower. The result? A 0 to 60 time of under 7 seconds. That was quick, especially for the mid-80s, and it made the GLH a serious contender. Dodge also gave it suspension upgrades and other tweaks so it could handle all that newfound power. But the best part? The name. GLH stood for Goes Like Hell, and if that wasn't wild enough, Shelby and Dodge went a step further and released an upgraded version called the GLHS, short for Goes Like Hell S'more. Only 500 of those were ever built, making them a rare and highly collectible piece of Shelby and Mopar history. 1975 Chevrolet Vega Cosworth. After the debacle of the Chevrolet Corvair in the 60s, they were reluctant to enter the compact market again. But since the segment had grown, Chevrolet didn't have a choice. So they revealed the new Chevrolet Vega as a 1971 model. The Vega was a compact, modernly styled model, and it came in three basic body types: a two-door coupe, two-door sedan, and a three-door wagon. The front end resembled closely to the design of the 1971 Camaro, with similar grille, headlights, and bumper. But in 1975, Chevrolet introduced the interesting, although not as successful, Vega Cosworth model. It featured a high-revving 2.0-liter four-cylinder twin-cam motor, producing 110 HP. Although it wasn't particularly fast or strong, the Vega Cosworth was attractive with its interesting black and gold paint and unique wheels. They produced the model in cooperation with the British engine engineering company Cosworth, famous for their Formula One engines. 1983-87 Dodge Charger. Even though the Charger from the late 70s was a lame, slow car that threatened to kill the muscle car reputation of the glorious late 60s and early 70s, Dodge felt the name deserved another chance. In those days, Chrysler was all about K-platform front-wheel drive cars. So Dodge introduced the Charger as an option on the compact, boring Dodge Omni for 1981. However, the appearance package proved somewhat popular. In fact, it was enough to convince Dodge to try it as a separate model for 1983, and that is how the L-body Charger was born. Despite the famous name, the 1983 to 1987 Charger was just a sportier version of Chrysler's compact models. With four-cylinder power, front-wheel drive, and a lack of performance, the Charger was just a model to fight import compacts.